Well, good afternoon, conference. You know, I've been thinking back about those 5 extraordinary days in May and our decision to go into government and to form a coalition. And even though it's been tough, and it's still tough, I know it has been worthwhile. Never forget that by forming a government, we put our country first, and we should be proud. And it is this government, with Liberal Democrats in it, that delivered us from the brink of disaster and got us on the road to recovery. And our recovering economy is just as much down to us as it is the Conservatives. And you know, conference, I have been really lucky, and I have been able to do uber-liberal things in government, from equal marriage to tackling female genital mutilation. But before I tell you more about those things, I actually want to pay credit publicly to Nick and to Danny, because they really have done the tough stuff. And it is their resolve and their rigor that is getting this country out of the mess it is in. And it hasn't been an easy ride, oh no. And it won't be an easy election. But 2 things are for sure. On their own, a Labour government will bankrupt this country. It is the one and only consistent feature of Labour governments. On their own, the Conservatives will only lurch further to the right. Goodbye Europe, goodbye human rights, and put fairness on the back burner. Only the Liberal Democrats can deliver a stronger economy and a fairer society. And I am so glad I am a Liberal. You know, it's good being a well-balanced and developed human being. It's good to live and let live. It's good to want to protect the environment. And it's right to care about the rest of the world. Of course, since we last met, it seems our world has become an ever more dangerous and unstable place, with news from abroad dominating the headlines. Indeed, this morning we woke to the dreadful news of Alan Henning's brutal murder, and our thoughts go out to his family at what is a terrible time for them. But Iraq, Syria, Libya, Gaza, Ukraine, so much suffering to wrap our heads around. But there are other harrowing circumstances that barely merit a mention. South Sudan, with tens of thousands dead and 1.5 million displaced, teetering on the edge of famine, mostly unnoticed. The missing girls in Nigeria, long gone from the headlines. Afghanistan, barely a word. Mali, where? But DFID, the Department of International Development, is still there. And it is DFID who responded to the plight of the Yazidis on Mount Sinjar. Only hours after the Cobra meeting, we worked with the RAF and airdropped clean water, solar lights, and shelter onto that mountain. And in Syria, we have made the biggest humanitarian donation in our history, £700 million to the displaced peoples. And some of this money is especially for the children of Syria, so that we have no lost generation. And of course, we've also seen the Ebola outbreak in West Africa, and this is a crisis that has ravaged entire communities, claiming over 3,000 lives. The UK is taking steps to contain the outbreak and prevent more infections, committing 125 million to date. And this makes us one of the world leaders in addressing the crisis. But I have to say, we are nowhere near out of the danger zone as yet. So in my first 2 years as a minister in the Department for International Development, I guess I've traveled to Africa about 30 times. And you know the thought that haunts me the most? Every time I meet a girl who is just desperate just to go to school, every time I meet a woman fighting to keep her daughters from being child brides, and every time I meet a refugee torn from his home, just struggling to keep his family alive, I just think that could have been me. I didn't choose where I was born, my parents, or how I started out my life. None of us did. But of course, you know that conference. We Liberal Democrats understand this better than anyone else. We believe that everyone deserves a fair start, that everyone should be empowered to realize their own potential. Here in the United Kingdom, we've delivered the pupil premium, provided more childcare, and cut tax for the lowest earners. But our commitment to fairness doesn't stop there, and it doesn't stop here at home. We are committed to empowering the most vulnerable wherever they may be. And it's this compassion, this commitment to the rights and dignity of all people, that is the root of our internationalism. And conference, our internationalism is just as important now as it ever was, perhaps even more so. I'm the United Kingdom's Minister for tackling violence against women and girls across the world. And violence against women is endemic and epidemic, and it's a continuum, it's a spectrum. Here in the UK, 2 women a week are killed by their partner or ex-partner. 1 in 4 women experiences domestic violence. And as you go across the world, it just gets worse. Rape as a weapon of war, child brides, breast ironing. So many women who have no voice, no choice, and no control over their lives. So in DFID, I work to give women and girls that control to change their lives. So first and foremost, we are educating girls, because for each year you keep a girl in school, she's less likely to marry early, more likely to earn higher wages, and more likely to choose if and when she has babies. And we work on access to justice and training police forces. Can you imagine what it is like to be raped or sexually assaulted and know that there's no point in going to the police? At best, they will not care, and at worst, they will be just as likely to abuse you, harass you, or even rape you. Go to your village chief instead. I met a woman in Darfur who went to her chief to tell him about her husband's brutality. His ruling was that she should go back to her husband and be a better wife. But tackling one issue above all is my priority, because it is totemic. It is a symbol of the oppression and suppression of women, and that is ending female genital mutilation. FGM, cutting off female genitalia, is one of the most severe forms of gender-based violence there is. It is violence against women, and it is a problem we in Britain share with many countries around the world. 130,000 British women have been cut. Another 20,000 or more of our girls are at risk every single year. 30 million more girls in Africa alone are at risk of being cut over the next decade. And this is despite the fact that 25 African countries have already made FGM illegal, and despite the fact that the African Union took a resolution to the United Nations which passed, banning the practice worldwide in December 2012. So I decided that we in the United Kingdom needed to support this African-led movement. And ending FGM within a generation has become a mission to support the brave and amazing women champions who have spoken out, who have broken the silence. Women like Nimco Ali and Layla Hussein and many, many more. And just 6 months into my time at DFID, I announced a £35 million programme to support this movement for change, for that is what it is, a movement for change. And it is the biggest single investment any country has ever made to end FGM in the whole world. Conference from Burkina Faso to Kenya and Cardiff and Bristol. I've seen firsthand why this investment is so important, and we are making progress. Prevalence rates are falling in some parts in Africa. The UK's first prosecution is underway, and FGM has quickly made its way up now the international agenda. I spoke at the United Nations in March, and I found myself surrounded by ministers and NGOs and young people from all across the world, everyone discussing how to end FGM. And I was so delighted that my mission and campaign became so popular that the Prime Minister himself decided to join me and focus this Summer's Girls Summit on ending FGM as well as early child and forced marriage. So Liberal Democrats, where we lead, David Cameron can't help but follow. At the Girls Summit, Nick Clegg announced that all frontline workers in the public sector, teachers, social workers, health workers, police, would all have compulsory training on FGM, how to prevent, how to protect. This is a Liberal Democrat initiative, and it's a huge step forward. And for so long, it's actually been the missing link when trying to tackle FGM in this country. So, conference, ending FGM once and for all is our promise for the next general election and beyond. Of course, there are many other so-called traditions that keep people locked in oppression. After all, it's not only your gender that the power-hungry find threatening, but also who you love. LGBT persecution is about power. It's about keeping people in their place. At home, we have made incredible progress. And obviously, words can't really describe the overwhelming joy I felt attending 2 beautiful wedding ceremonies on that historic day in March when finally love became equal before the law. And you know, now, often when I speak at an event, someone, usually a young man, will sidle up to me at the end and say, "Thank you for what you did." And it is very emotional. I cry, he cries. But we both know that our country is a better place now that marriage is equal. And this was the culmination of a long journey in the United Kingdom. But as we celebrate our victory, we must not forget those LGBT campaigners around the world whose journey is still desperate. From day one in my role as a DFID minister, strengthening the department's LGBT rights strategy has been one of my top priorities. And DFID's approach has rightly been led by local gay campaigners in each country. And they have asked that we take a subtle approach for probably very obvious reasons. So respecting their wishes, that is what I have done. I have raised my concerns in private, in Africa, with African ministers and prime ministers, and met privately with local LGBT groups in the country. But we can do more. I instructed every DFID country office in Africa to report back to me with details of what they are doing and what more they can and will do on LGBT rights. And now DFID is going further. In Africa, as the freedom to love who you wish sadly comes under greater and greater threat, DFID will do more to connect campaigners across the world, from South America to Africa to Asia, so that they can share their techniques and learn from each other. We can help be the catalyst for their change, and we will help defend and promote human rights everywhere, because that is what this is about. I meet inspiring campaigners wherever I go. And all any of them want is human dignity, that the universal values of tolerance, love, and mutual respect are upheld. And it is our duty to support them, and that's why Liberal Democrats will always be committed internationalists. That's why we've kept our promise to reach the UN's target of dedicating 0.7% of our national income to international aid. And because of Mike Moore's private members bill, we are finally close to enshrining that in law. And conference. Because of the Millennium Development Goals, we have seen the greatest progress in human history to lift people out of poverty and give a voice to the powerless. But the job is not done. The MDGs expire next year, and the international community has a once-in-a-generation opportunity to finish it. More than that, really, I believe we have a duty to finish it. especially for people like Dorothy. She was a young girl that I met in Uganda. She's blind and unable to walk. And for years, her father carried her 2.5 kilometers to school and back every single day. Once at school, she was bullied mercilessly, especially when she had to use the general latrine. Because of DFID and support from NGOs like WaterAid, Dorothy now has a wheelchair and the school has an accessible toilet. This small contribution makes a world of difference to children like Dorothy everywhere. And in DFID, I am making sure that children like Dorothy are never again an afterthought. I have announced that all school construction directly funded by DFID will have universal access. And I've used the influence I have to ensure that global funds, like the Global Partnership for Education, also put disability at the heart of their programs. And I want everyone on board with this. I want the World Bank and the African Development Bank and the private sector and the NGOs to make sure that whatever they do, they include disability rights in their programs. If we don't do this, who will? So, as the international community agrees a new framework to replace the MDGs, I believe the principle that must underpin all our future work is leave no one behind. No one, regardless of ethnicity, gender, geography, race, sexuality, disability, or station in life. This is the principle that binds us to conference. No matter what the aid skeptics say, there really is no us and them. Dozens of foreign languages spoken here in Glasgow. Over 180 languages spoken in my London constituency of Hornsey and Wood Green. We are all connected to events around the world and to each other. We all want a better future for our children and our grandchildren, and a chance to get on in life. And that's exactly what Liberal Democrats work hard to secure. Remember that over the next 7 months. Remember it when you're delivering door to door in the rain. Remember it when you're stuffing your 10,000th envelope. And remember it when you're talking to voters on the doorstep day in, day out. Liberal Democrats stand for fairness, for justice, and for empowerment, both at home and abroad. Thank you very much.